All right, well, we are sitting right now at the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, and we're with T.C. Boyle, T. Karageson Boyle, as your earlier books, but you
Well
dropped
pronounced,
that.
Rich.
Yeah, thank you.
Very well pronounced.
I'm not sure I knew how for the first few years, but I figured it out over time. But we're here. This is your home campus. We're at the campus of Southern California, University of Southern California. This is your home campus.
Indeed it is. I've been coming here for many a year from my home in Santa Barbara.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. The new book for you is The Harder They Come, which is also the title of a great Jimmy Cliff song. Tell us where the title came from, first of all.
I don't know what any book will be. It just happens. But I like to have a title and maybe an epigraph too, and that was the case with this book. So, The Harder They Come, of course I'm thinking of Jimmy Cliff. The first section takes place in Costa Rica on the East Coast, where there's a lot of reggae, and I loved his gangster movie he made in the late 60s in Jamaica, these guys, all of that, yes. But don't forget, the phrase is, the harder they come, the harder they fall. And that's the phrase that he's using too. It's a kind of challenge. I mean, who is harder? Who is tougher? You know. So I've got that to work with, and then the epigraph from D.H. Lawrence. The essential American soul is hard, isolate, stoic, and a killer. It has never yet melted. Well, that's a proposition. Is that true?
That epigraph, I was fascinated by it when I read it. You make a big deal about it in the front. I mean, all of your books often have an epigraph, but what comes first, the epigraph or the story? Do you go looking for one, or does that provide a seed for you?
It provides a seed for me, and it came first. But again, in the process of research. I liken this often because most of the audience I stand in front of, most of the audiences are composed about 90% of wannabe writers, you know? So they want to know, how do you do it? Well, in my case, it's like writing a term paper. You collect material, you take notes, and during the course of that, maybe you get an idea of who the characters might be, what the title is, or maybe some epigraphs, and then it's in place, it's fixed. Then you see something and you start and follow it.
So let's talk about that epigraph. It's a really hard-hitting one. It obviously stuck in your craw, but the idea of the American soul being hard and isolate, stoic,
and a killer.
And a killer, right. It leads into the violence that you find in this book. There's an undercurrent of violence throughout the book. You're examining the thought of violence in this book. Tell us about what it was for this book that was the topic that you really wanted to explore.
Well, again, you know, this is my 25th book, and I have this life's work. And I look back and I see how the books are allied and how the themes work in and out of each book in different valences. But that is not what you do at the beginning of your career. You're just an artist making art. So, in this case, the last novel was San Miguel. San Miguel was a very great challenge for me, the hardest book I had to do. It is set on the Channel Islands off of Santa Barbara, and it's an historical piece about 3 women living on this island alone in 2 periods, 1890s, 1930s. It's very hermetic, and it's also non-ironic. I wanted to see, could I write a full novel, purely realistic, without using my trademark irony? I did, and I'm happy with the result. However, because it was so purposely hermetic, living on this island, they never leave the island, I wanted to blow it open. And like everybody in our society, I presume, I'm disturbed by what's happening, and particularly by gun violence. And in this case, the individual shooter, almost always a young, disaffected white man, often mentally disturbed, who, thanks to the NRA, is liberally provided with automatic weapons. What is this about? So I wrote the book in order to find out.
So, 2 things. Let's start with the disaffected, angry white youth. Why do you think that is? I mean, what have you found as you went through this process of writing this book? Why do you think that is often the prototypical shooter that you find?
Well, Rich, all journalists want me to give statements like this, but I really can't. I don't know if I've discovered anything. See, the purpose of a novel is to dramatize so that people can enter in and make their own determination. Certainly, in this book, I'm wondering about the kind of desensitization of our society, that is, the first-person shooter video game, for instance. You and I could play it and not break with reality, but certain people, like my shooter here, who happened to be, it's based on a real case, happened to be schizophrenic and had a hard time dissociating himself from the fantasy and the reality. We also live in a society that is completely controlled by electronics. Remember the Terminator? The machines took over? Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Here it is. We're in it. And increasingly, we don't know our neighbors. We don't have a community. We don't know anybody. Now, does this give rise to individual gun violence? I don't know. But in the past, mentally ill young men, sadly enough, might have taken their own lives. Now they not only take their own lives, they want to take us with them. So why is this? And I'm writing this book to meditate on that.
That leads me to my second question. You talked about writing San Miguel purposefully in a non-ironic way. It was a discipline. It was a writing discipline for you as you wrote it. And in this book, you went through this process, meditative process of examining a subject. You've infused these other elements into your writing that create a process, an exciting process for you as a writer. You're 25 books in now. The other element for this that was really interesting for me in that regard was that you'd written a long time ago about this area in budding prospects in Mendocino and Mendocino County, and it was a different kind of book. It was very funny. I mean, there was a lot more satire. It was comic. It seems to me you've really gone such a distance from that writer, that T. Corageson Boyle, that wrote those books, to this, which is so much more deeper, so much more meditative, so much more thoughtful, and to you as a writer, more of a sort of a discipline, a writing discipline.
Yeah, it's a great observation, but I never say never. I just always want to be doing something new. The next novel, which is half done, is a return to my environmental concerns and a broader kind of comedy, although it's also a dark comedy. Budding Prospects was an anomaly in that it is a kind of slapstick comedy. It's a real story about a pot plantation in Willits in the early 80s. I had access to this. I knew the people involved. And in essence, and there's an epigraph from Ben Franklin in that about working hard and getting up early and having a good scheme. This is the American way of making money. Well, these guys, they couldn't grow anything, and it was a disaster. All right, so this is why I chose Northern California for this book, because it's the same neck of the woods, but as you say, tonally, and in its interests, this book is far deeper than that one. But that one was purposely a comedy. You know, why not? Why not do anything that I possibly can?
And with 25 books now, I mean, you become sort of this sage, writer with a canon. You used to be you were the sort of the young upstart. I still see you that way, and yet you now have this body of work that's so large that you're becoming one of those writers like those that you emulated when you were younger.
Yeah.
And how does that feel now as you think about your own career as a writer?
It feels great because the writers I most admire, like Garcia Marquez or John Updike, Pynchon, there are so many of them, they do create a body of work. That's what you're supposed to. If you're a dedicated artist and you're lucky enough to live a long life, then you're going to create work constantly. This is my aim in life. I don't do anything else. I don't write for Hollywood. I've never written on a deadline. I've never worked for anybody. I'm just doing exactly what I want, and that is to follow this artistic impulse and see where it goes. So that the new one, the Terranauts, is set in Arizona in the 90s, and it's about the biosphere experiment in which 3,800 species were put under glass, and 4 men and 4 women were locked inside for 2 years. Well, what is that about? Can we create an artificial environment, It's also got 3 eye narrators. I've never done that before. So here you've got 3 distinct points of view, but they're from third person. 3 eye narrators. So they're each telling the same story, but from their own prejudice and speaking right to you. How's that going to work? So far, so good. I'm halfway through.
Yeah, we're excited, and I love the pace that you write at. When you're, as a writer, you've made it to the other side now. You're an established writer with a long career, with an incredible list of books. They write about your books in glowing terms in the New York Times and elsewhere.
Rich, you make me feel so good and so venerable. Man, I should have worn a long white beard and wig for this interview. And where's my cane? Ken, give me my cane, would you?
Well, you've made it. But writing is a tough profession, though. Yeah, there you go.
Just joking. Come on.
No, believe me, you have earned that.
I am
but
lucky.
But there are all these writers on the other side. It's a long process to get where you got, obviously. And a lot of them don't make it. And a lot of them want that you have. What do you tell them when they're asking you about this? It's a tough profession.
Well, I get the question from the crowd almost every night. What's your advice to a young writer? And it is, of course, come from a very wealthy family. I have been incredibly lucky. I just did what I was going to do. I had a support from my wife, from my agent, from this university. and it allowed me to grow along with my audience through the years. I feel blessed to be able to just do what I want to do as an artist in a democratic society. Say what I want. There's one exception, though, I should tell you. Yes, I can write about anything I want, except former girlfriends and my wife's family.
Off limits.
Yeah, those are off limits.
Yeah, and you've always known that.
That's the best stuff, though.
Yeah. Well, T.C. Boyle, what a pleasure.
Likewise.
Venerable. I could say it again, but it's really nice to have you. The Harder They Come, a wonderful book. Welcome to your home turf.
Well,
Los
thanks,
Angeles
Rich.
Science
It's
Festival
don't
books.
forget, it's only my 25th book. We'll do this again on my 50th,
I'm
okay?
looking forward to it.
Then I'll be venerable.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for being here.
All right.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure.